All right, let's talk about one of the biggest paradoxes in our own bodies, your immune system. It's your ultimate protector, right? But how does it know the difference between a dangerous virus and, well, you? We're diving into a Nobel Prize winning detective story that finally answers that question. So, our immune system is this incredible protector. But then, why does it sometimes turn on us? For decades, scientists had a partial answer, but a deeper mystery was still out there. And it would take two completely separate teams on different continents, decades, to finally solve it. All right, let's set the stage. Our story really begins with this long-held belief about how our immune system learns to tell friend from foe.
Okay, so the textbook explanation was this thing called central tolerance. You can think of it like a really tough training school, a boot camp, inside an organ called the thymus. Its whole job is to weed out any of these traitor T cells that might attack our own body. But, and this is the big question, what about the ones that inevitably slip through the cracks?
Well, there was this one idea floating around about special suppressor T cells that could, keep the peace. But the research behind it was so flawed that the whole concept basically became a scientific joke. The field was a dead end. Seriously, almost everyone just moved on. Except for one scientist, Shimon Sakaguchi. He just couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be something more. He was really inspired by this weird observation his colleagues had made. See, when you take the thymus out of a mouse just a few days after it's born, you'd think its immune system would get weaker, right? But nope. It went completely haywire, developing all these crazy autoimmune diseases. And that was the clue. It suggested that some kind of protective cell, also trained in the thymus, was being removed along with it. And that single, strange observation, that's what sets the whole stage for our story. It kicked off two parallel investigations, happening on different continents, each one starting from a completely different clue, but both of them chasing the same biological ghost. So first, let's follow Sakaguchi's quest. Now, to prove these security guard cells were actually real, he had to find something that made them unique. He needed to find a specific marker, think of it like a uniform, that would set them apart from all the millions of other T cells in the body. After more than a decade of just painstaking, relentless work, he found it. In 1995, he zeroed in on this small subset of T cells that had a unique two-protein combination. They had the standard CD4 protein, but they also carried a second one, CD25. This was it. This was the uniform he'd been looking for, and when he removed only those specific cells from mice, boom, they developed autoimmune diseases. He finally had a name for them, regulatory T cells. But, the scientific community was still really skeptical, especially after that old suppressor cell mess. They wanted more proof. Okay, now let's switch gears and jump over to our second investigation. This one actually started decades earlier, back in the 1940s, with a strain of mice that were just born inexplicably sick, a total evolutionary fluke. These mice, which they called scurfy mice, were in rough shape. Their immune systems were just in a state of constant, furious overdrive, attacking their own bodies. It was tragic. But for two researchers, Mary Brunkow and Fred Ramsdell, this genetic accident wasn't just a tragedy. It was a clue, a massive clue, a potential key to unlocking the secrets of autoimmune disease in all of us. So they set out on this monumental task to find the single faulty gene responsible for all this chaos. And you have to remember, back in the 1990s, this was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, if the haystack was the size of a planet. Let me just show you what I mean by that. Okay, so the mouse X chromosome, which is where they knew the mutation had to be, contains roughly 170 million DNA base pairs. Think of that like a genetic sentence that's 170 million letters long. And they were looking for a single typo. Just one wrong letter in a 170 million letter book. It's just mind-boggling. So, after years of painstaking work, mapping and comparing gene after gene, they found it. And get this, it was in their 20th and final candidate gene. Talk about down to the wire. They hit the jackpot. They discovered a previously unknown gene, and they gave it a name, FOXP3. And this is the moment. This is where our two parallel stories just spectacularly collide. Brunkow and Ramsdell's discovery in 2001 was the absolute missing piece of the puzzle that would finally prove Sakaguchi's work was right all along.
The connection was just stunning. It turns out the FOXP3 gene, the one that when it's broken causes the scurfy mice's disease, was the master switch. It was the genetic instruction manual for creating the very security guard cells that Sakaguchi had been hunting for decades. So a broken gene meant no security guards, and no security guards meant total immune system chaos. It all clicked into place. This timeline here just lays it all out perfectly. You can see how these two totally separate lines of inquiry, starting way back in the 80s, finally converge into one powerful discovery. Sakaguchi found the cell, sure, but it was Brunkow and Ramsdell who found its genetic master switch, and that was the irrefutable proof the scientific world had been waiting for. So what are these regulatory T cells? They are the peacekeepers of the immune system. They're the ones that prevent friendly fire. They tell the immune army to stand down after a battle is won. And this whole vital process of keeping the peace in the body, that's called peripheral immune tolerance. So why should you care about all this? What does it all mean? Well, this fundamental knowledge hasn't just solved a biological mystery. It has blown the doors wide open on entirely new ways to treat some of our most challenging diseases. And it all comes down to this really fascinating balancing act. For cancer, it turns out tumors are incredibly clever. They actually hijack these Tregs to build a protective wall around themselves. So, to fight cancer, we need to weaken or shut down those security guards. But for autoimmune diseases, where the immune system is way too aggressive, we need to do the exact opposite. We want to strengthen the Tregs to calm everything down. One of the most exciting new frontiers here is a treatment called cell therapy. The process is just incredible. Doctors can literally isolate a patient's own regulatory T cells from their blood, multiply them by the millions in a lab, and then infuse this newly expanded army of peacemakers back into the patient to restore order. It's like sending in reinforcements. For this absolutely revolutionary work, for unlocking the secrets of immune tolerance and basically launching an entire new field of medicine, these three scientists, Sakaguchi, Brunkow, and Ramsdell, were deservedly awarded the 2025 Nobel Prize. And that really leaves us with a final provocative thought. We found the immune system's off switch. So what's next? Well, learning to master this switch, to turn it up or down exactly when we need to, that is one of the next great frontiers in medicine, with the potential to change millions of lives. Thanks for joining this explainer.